Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the April CMPA Planning Committee meeting. I'm delighted that we're here meeting face-to-face today, and for those members of the public joining us today, either in the room or virtually, I'm Gaynor Roger, the convener of the CMPA Planning Committee. So today's meeting will also be streamed live on the Cairngorms YouTube channel. For members in the room, please note there are no table microphones today, and therefore all conversations, including whispers, can be picked up by the main room microphone. We're also joined by members on the Teams channel that you can see in front of us today. So for those of you on the Teams channel, some of you have an interest or will be maybe hoping to speak today on some of the applications. Can I ask you to please keep your microphones muted, and I'll bring you in as and when it's your turn to speak. Thank you. So before we go any further with the meeting, I'm going to ask Katrina to run a roll call, please. Thank you.
Chris Beattie.
Here.
Kenny Deans.
Here.
Paul Gibb.
Here.
Janet Hunter.
Here.
Russell Jones.
Here.
John Kirk.
Here.
Bill Loban. Lauren McCallan.
Here.
Eleanor McIntosh.
Good morning.
Douglas McAdam.
Here. Good morning.
Xander McDade.
Present.
Fiona McLean.
Morning, Katrina.
Gaynor Roger.
Here, thank you.
Derek Ross.
Here.
Thank you, Katrina. Katrina, I'll move to apologies in a minute. I'll just finish off. So for the meeting today, I will chair the meeting as far as possible. If something happens, which means I can't, Eleanor here, as our vice convener, will take over during the meeting. Members, to help move the business forward effectively, please keep your questions succinct and to the point. Focus firmly on the clarification of technical or planning issues. And once we've moved into this discussion phase of an application, it would be helpful if members could indicate at an appropriate point if you're minded to put forward any proposal regarding the officer's recommendations. Should a member wish to pull together an amendment to the motion on any of the items today, a breakout room is available and you'll be joined there by Peter Ferguson. So, Katrina, I've got apologies from Anne Ross and Jiva Blackett.
Yes, that's correct. That's all I received.
Thank you. I'll move then to item 3, which is declarations of interest. So, members, is there anything you wish to declare as a declaration of interest with regard to any of the items on today's agenda? If you have, can you please be clear on the item number, the nature of the declaration, and whether you still are going to take part in the discussion or whether you're going to leave. So I'll take Bill first, then Derek.
I have a declaration of interest for item 5 on the agenda. I'm a director of Cairngorms Scotland Limited, and I will be leaving the meeting.
Thank you. And Derek, please.
I have a declaration of interest on item 9, the wind farm. I've made public comments about government policy on wind farms, and I will be leaving the meeting.
Thank you, Derek. Russell.
Yeah. I have a declaration of interest in item 6, the track at Pitmain. I work for a company who has in the past purchased timber from Pitmain and probably will in the future, so I think I will leave the meeting. I have a conflict.
Thank you, Russell. Anyone else? For myself, just in the interest of transparency, I'm going to declare that I have family membership of the Cairngorm Mountain Ski Club, and in relation to our first item in our agenda, item 5, I've looked at the test and decided that that relationship is far enough removed that I will be able to stay and take part in the discussion. So that's what we're transparency. Thank you. Okay, members, thank you for that. I'll move now on to item 4, and that's the minutes of the previous meeting on the 10th of March, and matters arising not covered elsewhere. So committee members, we've got, first we'll look at page 1 to 10 of the public meeting. Can I ask if committee is content with the accuracy of those minute meetings? Yep, thank you. Therefore, can I assume the committee is happy to approve these minutes?
Good.
Thank you. Members, I'll move a motion to take the minutes from a confidential session on the 10th of March at the end of this public session, and we'll move into a short confidential session for an update. So moving on to the papers. So the first item on our agenda today, and Bill, I think you were going to lead.
I'll be having coffee.
So the first item on our agenda today is an application for planning permission to relocate the snow factory at Cairngorms, and I'm going to hand over to Stephanie to take us through this application. So over to you, Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. So the application site relates to Cairngorms Mountain on land in between the day lodge and the mid station at the ski centre. The application looks to relocate the existing snow factory from the Cairngorms car park to 350 metres southeast of the Ranger Base station. So here is the photograph of the existing structure and another view of it from the side. So the proposal includes the construction of an access haul road and concrete plinths for the siting of the snow factory and a timber storage shed. Here we have a visualisation with the day lodge behind us on our left, looking up the slope to the new location of the snow factory. And here is another visualisation showing the existing view beforehand to the other side of the funicular, which is just in the foreground here. And the after view with the snow factory. I can't point to it there. So the snow factory creates snow by abstracting water, which is then cooled to freezing point within the container. So a new permanent water abstraction, intake and water supply pipework is proposed to be installed 275 metres up the slope, with any overflow returning to the existing land drains. And this will be a gravity-fed system. So the snow factory has been on site since 2017 and in response to the unreliability of the snowfall. So the permanent relocation of the factory is to move it to a more effective location, and the proposed development is considered to support the ongoing viability and operation of this tourist site by providing ski-related facilities for visitors to use to improve their experience. Regarding landscape impacts, the proposal would be seen in the context of the wider ski infrastructure and within the existing developed area of Cairngorms. The presence of the snow factory has been established in the wider area for 4.5 years, and its physical characteristics are well understood. It is acknowledged that the proposal will not enhance the landscape character and that there is no single colour that would work all year round to aid its mitigation. However, its function is appropriate to the location generally. Based on this, the proposal is considered to have a neutral impact on the landscape character, and the prevention of nighttime illumination, together with the prevention of additional text on the factory facades, are recommended to ensure that the impact level remains the same. A planning condition for its removal, should the facility cease to operate, is advised. Now, for clarity, members, we are recommending that committee agree to adjust the wording of condition 5 to include the following phrase. So for a continuous period of 12 months. So this is because the snow factory does not operate all year round. So what I'm asking for is for the condition 5 to therefore read as within 3 months from when the development hereby approved ceases to be used for a continuous period of 12 months for the purposes applied for. The development must be removed in its entirety and land reinstated to its condition prior to the granting of planning permission. all to the satisfaction of the Cairngorms National Park Authority acting as planning authority. So regarding environmental impacts, the proposal is not considered to have any adverse impacts subject to the planning conditions for the pre-construction surveys and subject to the implementation of the pollution prevention measures. Now, the Highland Council Flood Risk Management Team have no objections on the grounds of flood impact, and the proposal is not considered to cause any adverse impacts relating to flooding on or off the site. The vegetated drainage channels are proposed to feed into the existing drainage network on the site, which is acceptable. And approval is therefore recommended, subject to the appropriate planning conditions and including the amendment to condition 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Members, we also have Robert Evans, the agent, in the room with us today. So first of all, I'll take any points of clarity or questions for Stephanie, and then I'll invite Robert to come and address the committee. So members, we have been asked to support the recommendation to approve the relocation of the snow factory and implementation of the related infrastructure. Do you have any questions for Stephanie on the presentation of the application?
Stephanie, I might be missing this, so tell me if I am, but is there any impact on the landscape or environment of the structure once it's moved, you know, the existing site? Are we addressing that?
From where it is at present, so that's just the concrete area that's always been there, and that's just the land in front of the Days Lodge, so no.
So there's nothing?
There's nothing proposed on that. I think in the longer term, the strategy for Cairngorm Mountain is to look at addressing the overall car parking and cycling area and the visitor experience as they're coming into the site there, but that's not part of this application.
Doug?
Stephanie, under condition 6, I was just wondering if any consideration had been, which was about the elevations of the snow factory. Because in the visual, it looks pretty industrial, and I wondered if any consideration had been given to wood cladding the containers, because there's going to be a wooden shed next door, isn't there? I just wondered if that had been considered.
That has been put forward as part of the application, and it's been considered on the basis of what's been submitted, and on that it's a kind of neutral impact. The facade as it is obviously better in the winter months when there is snow, because the visual impact it improves from what it would be with normal vegetation during the summer. But no, that hasn't been considered to be necessary.
Timber's softer and it would turn grey as well. So just a thought. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Doug. I've got Xander and then Derek. So Xander first, please.
Thank you, Convener. On condition 5, which you mentioned in your opening remarks, yep, around within 3 months of the development ceasing to be used for the purposes applied for, it has to be removed in its entirety. In the event that it's unlikely in the current operator, but it's not impossible in other operators potentially in the future, that the operator goes bust, how is that condition going to be enforced at that point without any bond or guarantee of some
enforced on the owners of the land,
you know, there are aspirations of other forms of ownership in the future.
Well, it would be enforced on the owners of the site, whoever they were at that point in time. So the building that's the same way as any other development.
Thank you. Derek, please.
When I was up at the previous incarnation of the snowmaking facilities, what struck me most of all was the smell of diesel coming from it. Do we have any information about that and whether there's been any mitigation against that? I mean, that's what struck me. And there was a film in the burn, I remember, the day that I went up, you know, a film of diesel in the burn. Perhaps the agent might be able to explain more. I don't know, but as I say, that's what struck me when I went up to look at the previous site.
But yes, I mean, I think it's powered by a diesel generator and biodiesel that apparently they've been using up there for some time. They do have an aspiration to electrify everything on the mountain and in particular this apparatus, because it obviously does cost a lot to run. There are no other, there are no pollution links, because there are automatic pollution controls have to be applied to generators and things like that have to be complied with under SEPA. So the fact is that currently it uses a fossil fuel of some kind in order to operate.
So what mitigation are we putting in if there's a spillage of that fossil fuel, Gavin?
So that comes under normal handling of fluids. So that the normal practice that everyone at the Cairngorms have to comply with in all their operations in relation to moving dangerous fluids around on the site. So there's no extra need here for any of those precautions, because they're covered by the kind of licensing operations that SEPA.
So that's not a planning consideration, more a issue with SEPA monitoring, environmental monitoring.
It's a compliance with standard practice to avoid pollution. So there's nothing unusual about this.
Thank you. Janet?
Thank you. Sorry, I'm having difficulty downloading my paper. On the condition about the removal of the facility after 12, if I got this right, after 12 months of it not being used, I just wondered if you could clarify that a little bit, and that obviously we're all very aware of the vagaries of the weather, climate change, etc. And so, if it was, for example, only used in January of one year, and then the next year was a particularly warm year, there would be the need to remove the facility would come into force quite quickly. I'm just questioning the 12-month element of it without any caveats for, let's say, extreme weather, and notwithstanding the fact that the climate is going to change. And I feel if we approve this, it needs to have a maximum chance of working. We don't want to have it dismantled early because of a particularly bad year. So I just wonder if we could think of a way of dealing with that.
I think in practical terms, by use, we mean as in not used and unable to be used. So we would expect in normal periods of time there would be people would be going to maintain it to check that it's working, have it ready for the season. That's a use of the. When it ceases to be usable, there won't be any of that happening, and that's the time at which the operator should be thinking, we've got a bit of redundant stuff on the hill, we're going to have to think about when we get rid of it. And if it then doesn't work and isn't capable of working, that will become very obvious to everyone, and that's when the trigger would happen if it weren't automatically pointed out to us by the operator.
Okay, I just wanted a bit of clarity that we weren't going to dismantle it because it wasn't a cold enough spell for 12 months. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Stephanie? Peter, can I just check, is there anything that you need to advise members on in terms of the questions that you want to go?
The enforcement question, enforcement can be taken against either the owner or if there is a third party operator. So there would be enforcement.
Sorry, Peter, could you speak up a little?
Sorry, yeah. If there was a need to enforce the condition to remove, that enforcement action could be taken against either the owner operator or the owner or a third party operator, depending on the circumstances. But to Sanders' point, if the owner were to become insolvent, then enforcement action might hit a very low at that stage. So as long as the owner or operator has the means to carry out the work if enforcement action is taken, then the condition would be effective.
Okay, thank you. Members, Xander?
I just will Peter's point now. So if it was in the future owned by a charitable third party or limited company, for example, where that.
Sorry, Chair, I can't hear.
Sorry.
I mean, no, we don't have microphones. I think we've all got to project our voices.
I do apologise. I will do my best for the drama teacher over there. If it was owned by a third party in the future, not HIE, and they were to go insolvent, my understanding is liabilities, etc. Crown gets first hit at it, and then anything else would pass. So, I mean, there would be an issue around land ownership. But I suppose my concern here is obviously we're approving something that will have a potential visual impact and healing on the landscape, if there is no way of removing it.
Yes, with any planning conditions, there is a risk of insolvency of the owner, operator, and therefore inability to carry out all enforcement action. Planning also has the ability to take direct action, but there is the cost implication. So I think it's a question of the risk of enforcement of this particular condition has got to be weighed against other conditions. So virtually every condition in the planning permission has an enforcement risk. And the question, I think, for the members is whether there is an enhanced risk. For example, wind farms, it's recognised that there is an enhanced risk. And as you mentioned, that in those scenarios there is a requirement for security of some nature, whether it's bonds or cash deposits.
Thank you. So there is an element of risk to every decision that we take, I guess, and it's what element of risk are we happy to sit with? As a planning authority, we can take direct action, but that does then mean that there's a cost to the planning authority. So that's a fallback. Xander.
A question for Peter and Gavin. Can we, if we wish to apply a condition for a bond, to ensure we would have the financial ability? Sorry, I'm directing my question over here and trying to talk to them, but I appreciate that it's difficult. So I'm asking if it is possible, if we were so minded, to apply a condition that would provide a bond for reinstatement if required in the future.
Yes, if there was if your conclusion was that there was an enhanced risk in relation to this particular condition, then yes, that would provide justification for requiring security of some description. One possible tweak to that might be that in the event of a transfer of ownership, the requirement could kick in at that stage. Although even that isn't without risks, because the transfer could take place without that requirement being implemented. But perhaps with the current owner being high, that risk is of a different profile than it's mentioned with
Okay, thank you. Derek, would you like to come in?
With just some more clarification, how is the facility to be powered initially? You said that it was going to be electric. Is that going to be from day one of its operation?
I don't expect so.
So it's going to be powered by diesel?
As it is just now, yeah.
And where will the diesel be stored?
Storage shed. The shed behind.
Members, if that's everyone's questions, I'm going to now invite Robert Evans to speak to the committee. So Robert is the agent for the planning application. So Robert, you will have 10 minutes to address the committee. After that time, the committee will then maybe ask you some questions around clarification of what you've said. Okay, so Robert, when you're ready.
Thank you very much. My name is Robert Evans. I'm a partner and head of the planning team at Ryden, agent for the application on behalf of CMSL. Thank you for the opportunity of presenting to you this morning. I won't be long. I won't go over the detailed specific policy matters. They are dealt with in detail by the officer's report. I'm happy to field any questions the best I can on the scope of the application, or to direct any technical or operational issues or queries to Jim Cornfoot or Lee Bevins at CMSL, who are here virtually on screen, I hope. So just by way of summary, the application is a straightforward proposal to relocate the existing snow factory equipment to a permanent location. Exactly the same equipment, exactly the same operation as exists at the moment in terms of the generating capacity of it. We've provided technical detail clarification, particularly in respect of requests of the landscape officer for additional photo montages and CGIs of how the relocated equipment will look in situ at the new location. And also a detailed response in respect of the recently adopted NPF4, which now forms part of the statutory development plan. We've also provided a specific construction and environmental management plan and a visitor management plan as well, after clarifications with officers and consultations. Same equipment will be used in a location slightly further up the mountain. That will better serve the ski runs and provide guaranteed snow cover for a wider area, dispersing snow to areas for maximum benefit. That will be over the lower slopes and will lead to more skier days, which will enable more group bookings for schools and instruction, and make that a more reliable throughout the season, typically from mid-December through to mid-April. As the report suggests, the decreasing predictability of weather patterns, less snowfall and greater infrequency of snow threatens viability of all the mountain centres in Scotland and reduces skier days. This year we've seen many of the alpine resorts which have also suffered from low snowfall, which has rendered many of them virtually unskiable at time of peak demand. The metric of skier days is one person going skiing for a whole day. I know that sounds obvious, or two people going skiing for a half day, but it's typically used as a rough measure of how successful a season has been. The precise number of additional days the snow factory brings is difficult to exactly estimate, as it is dependent upon the weather conditions year to year, which fluctuate. But without snow factory, Ski Scotland suggests that the number of days might typically be down by 35% over the season. So it's quite a significant part of maintaining the operation of the ski runs throughout the season. The original planning permission dates back to 2017. The current snow factory permission expires on the 10th of December 2023. As a government-funded facility owned by the Highlands and Islands Enterprise, CMSL has net zero carbon targets and are currently reviewing the potential for micro-renewable generation for both wind and PV. The proposal is covered by the Construction and Environmental Management Plan. Ground disturbance and haul tracks will be made good with reduced widths of maintenance tracks for longer term servicing. That's part of the wider access and maintenance and use strategy of the mountain, and part of the bigger picture master plan for the ongoing initiatives and investment being made by CMSL. The existing location is on the car park area, so that will be returned and remained as part of the car park as well. So that will be made good. There was no objection from Nature Scotland. In fact, there are no objections from any of the consultees or members of the public, subject to conditions being met, such as appropriate environmental mitigation and management, dotterel monitoring, and mitigation and overpainting of some of the garish logos and writing on the side of the snow factory, and the long-term planting strategies as well, which will also reduce the visual impact. The report is clear on other issues, and we continue a good and close working relationship with officers of CNPA and the Highland Council, and I thank them for that. So I hope the application can be supported this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Members, do you have any questions for Robert? No, I see no hands. Members, can we move then into our discussion? So are there any viewpoints or comments that members would like to make regarding this application? Fiona.
Thank you. I actually agree with Doug on this. Looking at the visuals, it's a very industrial looking object, and I do wonder if it would be possible to have some wooden cladding on it just to make it sort of look a bit, to blend in more with other buildings that are on the hill. Just a thought, because I do think that having something industrial like that is not attractive for the mountain.
Yeah, I mean, that isn't proposed with the planning application, and I think it would be quite a difficult thing to condition in this case, because we don't know if it's possible. And apart from, yes, it would be a softer look, but it's quite a big structure anyway, and it will still look as a big structure, but it'll be larger because there'll be more of it with that timber on it. The timber is also going to add another kind of wind loading element to it, which might affect the strength and stuff of it, which probably means more engineers looking at it again to recalculate things. So as it's not part of this, I think that's probably not an option to easily consider here, because I'm not sure it'd be reasonable to condition.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I do agree with Dublin feeling that around the look of it. I think it is very industrial, obviously, and that is the nature of it. Some more mitigation around it. However, it does increase my concern about the fact that if the land did change ownership and there were a failure, and obviously we are all talking about there is a significant changing situation in skiing and climate, I would want to see ideally a condition added that if ownership changes outside of government ownership, that a bond would be required at that point. And I'm happy to have a discussion about that. That is my concern, and I think the risk of having a very industrial object deteriorating on the mountain is quite high, in my opinion. Yeah, as is the aspiration for a long time. So I would like to see.
Xander, I'll just come back to that, or I'll get Gavin to come in on that. The only thing I'd like to point out to members is, although we go up there and look at the mountain, and we can, when you're standing there looking up the mountain, just reminding people in our heads that it's full of ski infrastructure, which you see both winter and summer. So it's a highly developed area with a lot of infrastructure, and that could be said for all of the infrastructure on the mountains. So not only that one piece, but there's the buildings, the mid station, the top station, the base station, all of the ski towers, all of the tow boxes, the huts that are there. Now, this committee wasn't sitting when the planning application came many, many years ago for that infrastructure to be put in, so I'm not sure on what basis that was put in, but I'm not sure there is a bond. So I suppose it's just thinking that in the back of the mind, I think the committee, what risk are we willing to take, or not? I think, Peter, you've already said, and I think even if a transfer happens, they might not write into that about the bond. I think that's what I picked up. I'm not sure if you got anything on that.
Yeah, I think just one, which is, I think a reasonable approach would be that it would be possible for us to require a bond in the event of the transfer of ownership, so that bond exists if the land and the business is transferred to some other entity that we consider is less reliable than the public sector collectively, and that would be that's a reasonable thing, and it doesn't impact on anyone at this point in time. The impact is as a winter date, and it's effectively an acknowledgement of the liability at that point of sale.
Okay. So that would be put in as a condition. Are you saying that could be put in as a condition?
Yes, the LVP specifically envisages
some form of decommissioning security in relation to renewable energy and waste and contamination, but general principles where there is an enhanced risk, general principles would support such a condition. The wording, the precise wording in relation to a two-stage bond, we would need some careful thought, and by two-stage I mean no bonds for the current owner. One way of achieving the same outcome would be a condition which, on the face of it, requires details of the security to be so it's security for decommissioning the planning authority is interested in, and that security can either come from the covenant of the current owner, or if the covenant doesn't support that, or if there's a risk, that could come from a third-party security provider. So perhaps the best way to deal with it would be a condition which requires, prior to commencement of development, information regarding the security to be offered, and that can come from the existing covenants of the government. However, there could be a reporting requirement under the condition, so that if there were to be a proposed change, then there would be a reassessment of the security, and that would trigger a requirement for a party security. So the obligation would be there from day one. The obligation would be no different for government. It's just that the security could be met by government's covenant. And that may be the case for an incoming purchaser, and that could be assessed on its own merits rather than having a binary position of government no security, third-party landowner security. And I think that would allow a proportionate approach to be taken.
Okay, thank you for that advice. I think I've got Derek, Eleanor, and then John.
Chair, I've still got concerns regarding the fuel and what I smelt and saw at the installation, which was a very, very strong smell of diesel and what appeared to be leaching of that diesel into the burn. And, you know, do we have reassurances that that isn't going to be the norm? Because it could have catastrophic effects to the biodiversity of the area, potential.
Yeah, but I think, Derek, that if you thought that something happened, you should have reported that to SEPA or to somebody who could report it to SEPA if there was a genuine.
I did report it.
And they would go and inspect that and identify the problem, and CMSL would have to take measures to make sure it doesn't happen again. And that is standard management that they're responsible for across the mountain, across multiple sites. So that is normal stuff. And we are not, through the planning system, able to introduce any other reasonable measures to deal with that because they already exist and they must already be complied with.
But you can understand where my concerns are coming from.
Thank you, Derek. I've got Eleanor, John, Lauren, and then Russell. So Eleanor first, please.
Yeah, it was moments kind of gone now, but it was just on something you said, Kavina, and not to pick an argument with you, but surely it's this committee's job, just because a site is industrialised, we should be striving to get the best development possible at every turn, not just accept another industrial building because there's one there already and it's been there for 10, 20, 30, 80 years. You know, I feel strongly that we should be striving to get the best development that we can on every application that comes forward, not just accept something.
Absolutely, Eleanor. Yeah, I agree. Thank you. John, please.
I think we're kind of panicking a wee bit about taking away the building. I think there'd be a high scrap value in this whole outfit because it's all steel, electric motors, all the rest of it. I mean, the only way you can improve it is put up a proper brick building, which is obviously going to cost hundreds of thousands to do up there. So, I mean, I think it's part of Cairngorm Mountain. I think it's part of the future for survival. And I really think we're panicking over something that I don't think will happen. I think if the farm closed, that would be the first thing that would disappear because there is a high scrap value in it. It is metal containers, it's fully electric motors, copper, all the rest of it. Hey-ho, the scrap we should have got off the mountain in no time. So I think, it's part of the mountain. I think it's something we should be help and support.
Thank you, John. Xander, did you want to come in on that particular point?
I did. I appreciate that we are all very keen to see the success of the mountain. But I think if in the event of the collapse of a company or a charity, it is never that straightforward that the scrap man can just go in and take it and that money goes in the bank account. The process for who gets first claim on who gets first claim. I don't think HMRC is going to be up the mountain and getting the scrap value off it immediately. So I do have I do have concerns around this. I think I should say I'm very supportive of a community-based operator going in, and I would envisage HIE paying the bond at that point. But I think it's more about making sure that they don't have lots of liabilities if the situation changes in the future, that the liability has been basically upfronted by HIE.
Thank you, Lauren, next, please.
Yeah, no, I think it was just kind of touching on your point, Gaynor, and Eleanor's and John's to a point. I actually think the moving to the new site is actually going to enhance the visitor experience, because at the minute, if you're on the looking balcony, it does obstruct some view. So I actually think moving this further up the mountain, where it'll be easier accessible for the operations team and a better visitor experience from that base station outlook, if you like. I actually think this is going to enhance the visitor experience when you come to Cairngorm Mountain, and by the looks of it, potentially make operations easier. But I take into account the worries about the industrial look of it. It's a huge piece of kit designed to pump out huge volumes of snow, which is going to keep the centre afloat in those difficult periods. So I think actually this is literally a good move.
Thank you, Lauren. Russell, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'd just like to speak in support of the recommendation to approve it. I don't think anyone's going to say that it's a particularly good-looking building, but as has been touched upon, the ski area is there already, and there's an industrial look about it with the lifts, etc. And I think there's a balance, there's a bit of a trade-off, and I think that skiing is hugely important to our area, and if we can help that with this move, then I'm in support of it.
Thank you, Russell. So the feeling I'm getting in the room, I think we're broadly supportive, but there would be, I think, a want for an added condition around the kind of bond and how that infrastructure is removed from the mountain, if it ceases to work, and if the land, who owned the land, had been changed from a government agency basically to a non-government agency, and how that all would be secured. Is that my reading? I think in terms of that, and also we have the change in the wording of condition 5, as Stephanie has outlined, from the 3 months to the 12 months of operational inactivity. I think in terms of the extra condition, it sounds very complex, and that's maybe something that Peter, Gavin and myself would Peter and Gavin, and going forward, if committee were happy to do that. I don't think we need to go into a recess to bring back something different to the officer's recommendation. Are you happy with that, Xander?
Yeah, I'm happy, as long as the conditions.
Are the rest of the committee members happy with that approach? And our committee, is there anyone opposed to adding this extra condition in terms of that security of removal? No, I don't see anyone opposed. So therefore, committee members, are you happy to approve the relocation of the snow factory and the implementation of related infrastructure on the basis of the conditions that are set out in the paper, the change to condition 5 and the addition of a condition that relates to the removal of the infrastructure and a potential bond being secured in the future, if need be, if there's a change of ownership of land, to secure that that infrastructure can be removed. Has that covered everything? Committee members happy with that? Yeah. Great, thank you. We can now call Bill back into the room, please.
I believe in.
Okay, thank you, Russell. Our second item today relates to an application for the construction of a 4.83 kilometre forestry track, formation of passing places, renewal of bridge at land near Risley Cottage, Glen Road in Newton Moor. Members, we have both the agent and the number of objectors who've asked to address the committee today. So each grouping, so the agent will be 10 minutes and the objectors collectively will be 10 minutes. And before we do that, I'm going to hand over to Gavin to take us through the application.
Thank you, Kayla. So this is the overall application site. Apologies, I think there's an error in the line in the paper, but the application, it starts, the pointer's going to, well, the pointer just about work, starts on Pitmain Estate here, runs through an existing largely felled plantation, comes onto Glenbannister Estate, runs across the hillside as a new track, then cuts across an existing track here and runs parallel to it to join the public road in Glenbannister here. Then the application continues up the public road to the end of the public road where there's a car park. There's a road widening and passing places installed there. And then further, I suppose, just increase the size of the track to allow larger vehicles onto Glenbannister Estate and a couple of spurs there. So these sections are quite important because they're sort of distinct in the way that we refer to the application, because the parts to the left along the road itself, we don't see any significant problems in. There are a number of bits of information there that we needed to approve the application just to finalise it. We're satisfied with those changes. The real issues that we have with the track are in relation to the new track, which runs from the road around and actually cuts across lower than there, and I'll show that in a second. Here. So on this slide, hopefully you can pick out the red line there, unless you're colourblind with red and green. So that's the actual line of the track and the corridor that it will fit within. So at least from this distance, it's a little bit hard to see, but the track basically takes a straight line parallel to an existing track along an esker here before cutting across it. And there are some quite significant cut and fills in this application, and then runs across this hillside before it then has to do more cut and fill across burns and more hummocky terrain. Finally here, before it then takes another more or less straight line back into the plantation and back to the main track here, which then has other access to the road network. These are just some general construction details of the track, fairly standard stuff. It's more or less a 3.5 metre track, plus a bit at the sides, plus quite a lot of very long passing places, 45 by 4 or 5 metre passing places along the new track. In places the track itself actually gets to 10 metres wide, and there's obviously significant other works to the side of that, depending on whether it's cutting and ditches and things. So the footprint of the development is actually large, and this is a big road without being surfaced on the way. These are other details showing how it can be put into slopes. And again, this is fairly standard stuff. The things which are alarming to us are the sides of those ditches and the amount of cut and fill that will be required in order to create this large structured landscape and effectively landscape and visual impacts of that. This is where a model of what happens when it crosses peat, and it does have to cross peat, so it's floating track structures that will be elevated about 1.5 metres above those peat areas. In other parts of the application, not quite the same construction, but it will be elevated 3+ metres above the existing ground and cut 3 to 4 metres into the existing ground in locations to keep the gradients, I suppose, accessible for timber-sized lorries. And there's one part of it where there's going to be 3 to 4 metre gabion walls to the sides of it as well, because of the nature of the cut through a knoll in the landscape. So those are I suppose, the key elements we're concerned about. This is a long section of part of the track just to indicate the levels of cut and fill required. So you can see that that's the location where the gabion walls will be, where it cuts through that knoll and needs to go down 3+ metres. That's an area where it crosses a small valley where there's a burn, and then it has to be raised up 3+ metres across that area before it then has another section of cut on the other side. So these are just some of the more technical drawings of the track. So this is where it breaks off the Glenbannister Glen Road. So this is the road here, currently comes up, bends around. That's the road there. This is the new track proposed, parallel to the existing windy track along the top of the Esker. And then there's a small branch off here down to one of the plantations. I'm sorry, if I just go back to the right, you probably need to be close to see this, but this is where it bends around near the end of the Esker and then starts cutting across the hillside. So at that point, the track's 10 metres wide with the casting place on that bend, and then it starts coming and starts cutting across the hillside there. Apologies. Yeah, this is. This is that section around where I showed you the long section. So that's where the gabion walls are going to be installed. At this point, there's a rise in the ground, so it's raised up about 3 metres. There's an open culvert in here, which must be about 40 metres long to get from side to side. So it's quite a big footprint of development. And at this point, that's a cut in where it's about 3 metres and then reducing as it heads up. And then it crosses an existing track. I think this is the Stroom Road it's called, and then starts to cut through the hillside beyond that. And from that point onwards, it's flatter ground reaching the plantation to the northeast. I've shown you this because it just illustrates a couple of points. So this is changes to the public road near the end of it. So the public car park is just there. So this is more or less the end of the public road, and then it drops down to the current crossing point. Because of the gradient here, there's going to be a little bit of road realignment, and so the bridge is going to be immediately downstream of the existing bridge site with a little bit of realignment. Quite important because you see the hut circled here. Probably everyone knows Glenbannister is famous for its heritage, and there are numerous archaeological sites and remains there. So although the Highland Council archaeologist has no objection to the application, they obviously ask for a standard condition that requires investigation, survey, and then potential for excavation and recording as well, if necessary, from any development. So that condition, if it were approved, would need to apply to the whole thing and would have to be complied with. So these are just some drawings of that bridge, which again, standard stuff. It's a bridge to take large vehicles. it's obviously over a burn which connects to the River Spey SAC. So the applicant has done enough survey work to demonstrate that nobody is worried that there would be an effect on the River Spey SAC as long as they comply with the methods that they've proposed and undertake the survey work to prevent any harm there. So that's standard stuff. That's a photo looking up the glen across the existing bridge. So the new bridge would be immediately to the left of that, with that bridge removed. And that's looking from the bridge back up. You can just see a van parked up in the car park at the top of the hill there. So this is where there's going to be some realignment of the road, and it'll come across here with some reduced gradient to allow larger vehicles. This is a view from near the start of the esker. So this is the existing track which runs along the top of the lines along it, and then there'll be a new straight track across here as well, which will then end up here and then cut through a little bit further up. Applicant did provide visualisations, but we don't think they show anything particularly meaningful. So I have included a couple in the presentation to show you. So that is intended to be from a similar spot, I think, taken as if the track in the foreground would be on the esker and the track to the left would be the proposed track, but we don't consider that shows anything meaningful. So that's a view further along the esker, and round about this point the new track will cut across and then start to head across the hillside there. This is a view from higher up above that existing track. So the next slide shows an indicative line of the new track across this pretty open moorland landscape. So that's more or less it, heading over to the other side. This isn't a visualization. That dotted line is just to give you an indication of where the track goes. But the next slide shows what the applicant's visualization says. But again, we don't think it shows anything meaningful in this context, so we don't think it helps demonstrate anything. So the main planning considerations are the principle of development, which actually we're quite happy with the principle of access on this ground. I mean, the applicant has made a case that it's to allow timber extraction, and there are timber plantations which will require to be extracted, although a lot of that timber is wind thrown, has been for a long time, so there's some limited value in that. Nevertheless, the existing road, Glenbannister Road through Newton Moor, isn't suitable for a lot of timber loggers. So there's a real issue there, and it would also, I'm sure, allow the estate to more efficiently manage itself, because its main base is on the neighbouring estate rather than Glenbannister Estate. So that's fine, except that obviously those conditions, those policies which would allow that are always caveated by the need not to have other impacts on the environment, and that's where our concerns start to come in. So then we have the impact on landscape through siting and design and setting of that landscape. And in this case, this is a really big forest road, which is being constructed not in a forest, it's outside of a forest. So it's all visible to the eye in a very open landscape. So there's a fairly significant change to that landscape. It's a big footprint. You'll be aware that we have a range of policies in the local development plan, which in this case enhance the policy framework provided by MPF 4. And we have obviously the requirement not to have significant impacts on the landscape and special landscape qualities, and to mitigate and reduce them as much as possible. We've got another policy there which explicitly, in addition, applies to new private roads and ways, which has a kind of three-tier to it. So the first part of it is that it can be demonstrated they're essential for land management purposes, and I think probably we could accept that this is. The second part is they're designed to minimise landscape environmental impacts. They conserve and enhance landscape character and special landscape qualities of the park, which we don't consider this does. And the third one would be that they form part of a programme of works, including the removal of other existing private ways. roads and ways to deliver a net benefit to special landscape qualities. Now, the applicant's been very clear they're not proposing to remove any, so there's nothing of that. So it's only that this should minimise the landscape impacts of the site, and we don't consider it does. Then we have the environmental impacts of the proposal. Well, many of them are not great. However, there is a reasonably significant loss of habitat through the footprint of this track, and there is no mitigation within the application for that. I appreciate the applicants will make a case that they're doing other works within the wider area that are positive for the environment, but they're not part of this planning application. So there is no part within this planning application to reduce the impacts of the track. Clearly, we're satisfied that there aren't going to be any significant effects on international designated sites. So the habitat regulations appraisal concludes that with appropriate conditions, then it would be possible to consent this. There's obviously an effect on peat within this application. It cuts across ground which is peat rich, some deep peat, some less deep peat. The applicants have undertaken a peat depth survey, but it doesn't appear to have influenced the route of the track. It simply shows where the track will cross these areas of peat. So we don't see any mitigation for that either. And finally, at a much, much lesser level, potential impacts on archaeology, which could be addressed through a condition, and some access impacts. A new track would obviously mean other people could use it as well, so there's an improvement there. A little bit of clarity needed on the actual access arrangements during construction and how it then would be allowed after that, but that again could be dealt with condition. So this is really an application that is a difficult one because the principle of being able to extract the timber is important. We haven't been shown any alternative routes, and we're not aware of any alternative routes having been considered. Clearly, the estate have demonstrated through swept path survey that the Glen Road up Glen Banneker wouldn't be possible with large timber lorries, and we accept that. It's a small, narrow road. It has bends in it. There are properties right up against it. They've made a case that it's not possible to take timber out using smaller vehicles, which we don't have anything that we can counteract that with. But we also don't have any alternative routes being considered, and we suspect that this proposal could be designed to reduce very significantly its impacts on the landscape, either in a location similar to its current location through the addition of planting and works around the track, or potentially changing the actual layout of the track and its siting to other parts of the estate as well. So that's why we're recommending refusal.
Thank you, Gavin. Committee members, any questions or points of clarity for Janet? I don't have any hands. So I'm now going to invite the agent, Fraser Gillespie, to address.
Go ahead. Okay.
You've got 10 minutes, please, just when you're ready. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's actually Ewan Harris who's going to speak first. I'm going to speak first. So I just want to set the scene by saying that Pitmain and Glenbanker Estates believe that excellent environmental stewardship is the responsibility of all landowners, and that restoration of the valuable habitats can thrive alongside traditional sporting estate management objectives. We believe that undertaking projects such as the proposed removal of the non-native wind-blown exotic species of trees and in their place undertaking native woodland restoration in Glenbanker, as well as the obvious direct environmental benefits, it can be demonstrated to a wider audience of estate managers that such projects are achievable and that Cairngorms and the wider country will benefit as a result of these works. And already in conjunction with the Spey Catchment Initiative and Nature Scot, the River Calder has been subject to an innovative restoration project, which included riparian planting, which we've already done, which demonstrates our intent up here. The proposed native woodland restoration and creation project is integral to these works, and the Calder itself has demonstrated its importance by hosting visitors from international conservation organisations, the Cairngorms National Park themselves, other landowners and local groups, which is very positive. And I know that some members might not view sporting estates in a particularly positive light, which is fair enough. We're all entitled to our opinion. But it must be recognised that what we're trying to do here is an example of forward-thinking, engaged estate management. We're trying to do really good things. Sporting estates make up a large part of the ownership in the park, and we must be part of the solution to the environmental challenges that we face. It can't just be the preserve of rewilders to make a difference across the whole park and the wider country. So the extraction road, which is, to be fair, already said, is a means of achieving this positive environmental goal, not just for the estate, but for the wider environment and community. And so, that's the scene. Over to you. I'll pass over to Fraser Gillespie, who's the building surveyor relating to this.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Good morning. Fraser Gillespie, agent for the applicant in this application. I just want to focus on a couple of points this morning. 6th of April, the planning officer has issued 7 reasons to myself why he's recommending the application for refusal. 5 of these he reckoned were contrary to MPF 4, and 2 of those might be contrary to MPF 4 or might not be. I can tell you that every single one of the planning officer's reasons can be dismantled and on an evidence-led basis. And this morning I just want to focus on the 2 of these. The first is a statement which was also recently published in the Badenoch and Strathspey Herald, quite surprisingly to us, that the planning officer said the track has not been designed to minimise impacts on the natural environment. We have undertaken topographic drone surveys which informed the route with the least cutting and filling. We identified the previous routes and the finalised routes, along with the visual impact assessments, which were taken from 5 different positions. We severely reduced the landscape impact. The ecological and habitat surveys advised us to avoid areas containing, for example, sphagnum moss, and our peak depth surveys informed us of the topsoil depths. So to say that the design does not minimise the impacts on the natural environment is simply not true. Secondly, I would like to talk about peat this morning, because it is a huge aspect of this access track. MPF 4, Policy 5, soils. The planning officer stated that the route is on Class 1 and Class 2 peat. Now, the national mapping that the planning officer will have reviewed shows the area as being broadly classified as Class 1. However, MPF 4 says that no soils less than ½ a metre deep can be considered as peat soils. So our detailed peat survey shows 80% of the total track length is less than ½ a metre of topsoil, ½ a metre of peat. So this is not considered as peat soils per MPF 4's definition. So that's 80% of the entire track length is not considered as peat soils. And why is this? Well, recent scientific research, including that undertaken by the Natural Resources Wales, show that the top ½ metre of peat stores 0 carbon. So that's 0 carbon emissions by disrupting that top ½ metre of peat along 80% of the entire track, new track length. So we reckon, and this is a guesstimate, estimate, albeit based on educated survey information, that the remaining 20% of the track, which is deeper than ½ a metre, we estimate that approximately 5% of that track includes peat soils of a depth that may store carbon. Therefore, we reckon that the planning officer's assessment of the impacts on the environment are again incorrect. And based on the fairly significant length of the track, by quite a good margin. So, and the environmental benefits of the forestry conservation project would far outweigh the relatively small negative impacts to the environment caused by the initial creation of the track. One other point I would just like to make, if we've got time, relates to one of the other reasons it was that the application was recommended for refusal, is that we had not said that we were going to remove any tracks, any existing tracks, and therefore policy 5 under landscape 5.2, we were contrary to the policy there. Well, the application had been done on the basis that it was an entirely new track, and that's why we hadn't made any comment there. But we have since identified the bottom 60 metres of the existing sheepdog trial track. That's the one that runs along the north side of the Esker at the very base, and its connection with Glen Road would then become redundant with the formation of a new track. So the applicant would be prepared and happy to remove that very short section of existing track, which we believe would then knock out that other point of recommended refusal. Cultural heritage policy 9, again, recommended reason for refusal from the planning officer was that we hadn't made any specific statement with regard to the existing heritage items, hut circles, and the like, which are prevalent, as has been pointed out this morning, up Glen Banker. And the reason for that is that we had done a desktop survey and identified that none of them were within close distance of the proposed track, and therefore we felt that there was no requirement to make any comment. And we do note that the heritage officer has no adverse comment to make on that. But just for reference, we noted a township that is 570 metres northwest of the west end of the new track, a hut circle relatively close to the crossing at the new bridge section, but approximately 100 metres away. Further hut circles 450 and 500 metres north of the new track section, and a hut circle in Burnt Mound approximately 140, 100 metres from the north end of the new track section. So nothing that could be really considered close proximity. So that's why we didn't make comment there. So that is about all I'd like to say this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fraser. That's your time to stop, so thank you for that. Members, any questions for Ewan and Fraser on around what they've discussed with us this morning? John, please.
How big is the forest area? How many hectares is it?
Yeah.
80 hectares.
In terms of the forestry area that's non-native exotics that are to be removed, there's 80 hectares. So would you like that converted into volume of timber to come out?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be useful.
There'll be about 15,000 tonnes of conifer timber to come out. That's going to go to a variety of timber processors in the Highlands and Moray.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Can I ask, you mentioned a forestry conservation project. I wonder if you might go into a little bit more detail around what you're thinking of doing.
We've got a map that we asked to be shared as part of this process.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get that up on screen for you. That's the map now?
That's the map, yeah. So this map shows the both the non-native exotic compartments, which as the lighter green hatched areas, they will come out and be replaced by native trees, native species. The darker green areas are existing plantation that will be Scots pine productive woodland. So there's existing areas of that, and there's areas which will be planted with Scots pine, and the rest of it shows the native woodland creation sites. So 120 hectares of actual woodland planting, but it's creating a mosaic of habitats up the glen. The areas that aren't being planted between the steep hill ground, which is a triple SI, not suitable for planting, and the river are principally deep peat, and that's why we're not planting on those. We're leaving those open woodland habitats. And the other land closer into Glenbank and Glenballoch's agricultural land, of which we are taking some, but leaving most. That is taken together with the riparian planting, which is vital, which was part of phase 1 of the project, which was to restore the River Calder by planting riparian species there, native riparian species, and also undertaking restructuring the river by putting in large woody structures, which you can view online if you want to see how that process works.
Great, thank you for that. Members, any other questions? No, thank you. Gavin, can I just bring you in to comment on anything you've heard? Thank you.
Yeah, and I think I just have to point out that looks like a really interesting, great woodland planting scheme, and we know that they're in the process of discussing that with Scottish Forestry, but it isn't part of this planning application. It's something else that sits outside of it. It's not fixed and attached to this planning application, and I think what they're implying is that because they're doing that,
we can't apply for felling licence. We've got
waste use planners is that the main impacts of the development are from the track that cuts across ground to the northeast of that new planting. It's not connected visually with that new planting, it's separate, and there isn't the same mitigation that would be provided, for example, by that planting around the new track itself.
Thank you, Gavin. Sorry, Kenny, did you have your hand? No.
Yeah.
Doug and then John.
Yeah, it was a quick one. It was a point that Fraser had raised about their route selection site. I don't think we've actually seen any of the details of that. Because you said if there had been other options, we haven't seen them. But I think it would have been quite useful to have actually seen the detail of that process that had been gone through.
We haven't seen that detail either. We have the detailed drawings that are proposed, but we don't have anything else.
Well, it's a pity maybe that wasn't shared.
Okay, so at the moment I'm just taking questions for the applicants, and we can move into discussion. We've still got to hear from the objectors. So any questions for the applicant or anything on what Gavin has said and coming back? So I'll take John.
What, if this new development and extra planting, how's the materials get out there for that? If there's not a road, or is there
there's a public road which runs through Newport up into Glenbank.
Yeah.
I mean that road.
That's detailed in that construction programme.
In terms of the new planting, that will be more difficult if there isn't a new road there in terms of delivery of fencing materials in particular.
Sorry, I'll come back and ask you to answer the question in just a second.
Yeah, that's what I was meaning, is getting the fencing material and all that out there.
So it would be possible to use the existing road to do that. Certainly it would be very difficult to extract timber out from that road.
So for the applicant, Doug was just remarking that we hadn't seen we hadn't seen alternative routes. I know that the one that you said you presented is the final route. and John was just asking about how materials were going to be moved up there. So I'll come back to Ewan and Fraser. Is there any comment you want to make on those questions from Doug or John?
Sorry, Chair, can I just come in?
Yeah,
I think it's a bit irrelevant. We can only view what we've got in front of us. We can't say, oh, there could have been an alternative as per Doug's intervention. I think that's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Chair. With respect.
Yeah, I think Doug was just asking why had they not been submitted. I think.
But it's not. It's not our. We don't get to select at a planning committee which one we like the best. That wouldn't be.
No.
Derek, with respect, that wasn't my point. My point was that there was a process that had obviously been gone through, and my understanding from this was that we hadn't understood that process. It was just this is it. So my point was about the process that had been gone through.
But we
not that we would choose.
But we as a planning committee aren't party to the process.
Generally, no.
Yeah.
So I think Gavin has answered Doug and John's question. I'm allowed to come back once to the agent to see if there's anything they want to add to those questions. And then I'm going to move on to the objectors who wish to address the committee. So Ewan and Fraser, if you'd just like to come in on the questions that were posed there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Firstly, on the point of the lack of other routes, the application did show a plan with 6 or 7 of the originally considered routes that the state had been considering before we started the process of the land surveys and ecological surveys, etc. On the most recent NVC survey map, the most recent previous track route was clearly shown, and this was pointed out to the planning officer during the exchanges we had through the submission of the planning documents. So there are maps that clearly show the other routes that were considered within the planning application, and they should be on your system. If you don't have access to view them just now, then I'm not sure why that is, but they do exist and they were part of the application. The point of materials, how are materials gotten out to the middle of the track? The proposal, and this was detailed in the construction programme, it's a phased construction programme that starts at the southwest end of the new track, while simultaneously starting at the east end of the new track from Strone Road, and working from both ends. That's how materials are transferred out to the centre point and completion, I guess. And there was also a bird nest. I can't remember the name of the bird in one of the ecological surveys, which was identified approximately 450 metres north of the proposed track. And we had to avoid disturbance there between the breeding season months. And that was another reason for the construction programme starting at either end of the new track, rather than starting at just the one end and disrupting the ground nesting bird.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification for those 2 questions. I'm now going to move, so if you could mute your microphone, please, thank you. I'm now going to move on to our objectors who have asked to address the committee. So we have 3 objectors, 1 in the room and two online. So we've George Allen online, Dave Morris online, and Gus Jones. Gus, is it yourself or Tessa that will be speaking today?
Tessa will be speaking today.
Thank you, Tessa. Between you, you have 10 minutes. So my suggestion is that you take 3 minutes each.
Can you
hear that? Who would like to go first? Is it yourself, George? So we'll do George, Dave, and then Tessa. Is that your expectation?
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
No, it was George and then myself and then Dave.
Dave's going last. Okay.
Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you okay, George. I'm just going to get my timer on. So George, when your 3 minutes are up, I'll let you know, because you'll just have a few seconds to kind of wrap up, and then we'll move on to Tessa in the room and then to Dave. Okay, so it'll be 3 minutes for yourself. So I'll start my clock when you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, off you go.
I'm representing North East Mountain Trust. As committee members may know, NEMT is a Scottish charity. Through club and individual membership, it represents around 1,000 people who enjoy visiting hills and remoter places. NEMT strongly supports the report's recommendation to refuse. The recommendation completely aligns, as it should, with Section 5 of the Local Development Plan. In particular, paragraph 5.1, which addresses the special landscape qualities of the park, and 5.2, which covers hill tracks. The park is to be commended for providing clarity against which applications can be judged. In providing robust guidance on hill tracks, the park has been a leader amongst planning authorities in Scotland. Both these sections of the LDP only allow deviation from policies in exceptional circumstances, and there are no such circumstances in this case. It is a proposal which would have very significant detrimental landscape effects. The application suggests that the felled timber cannot be removed without this track. The case for using smaller vehicles on the Glen Road is not substantiated. Indeed, it is vague and contradictory. For example, the design statement says, and I quote, smaller road-going timber lorries are not available, but the submission from the agent says if smaller lorries were adopted, it would require double handling. This is contradictory. We understand that smaller lorries have been used elsewhere in the park for timber removal. The applicant also states that the cost of the track will almost certainly be more than the profits from the sale of the timber. This unconvincing rejection of the use of smaller lorries, and the question as to why it is proposed that the new track extends eastward beyond the Strone Road has led North East Mountain Trust to question whether the track is, in fact, primarily for forestry purposes at all. North East Mountain Trust strongly supports increased tree cover in certain circumstances, but this doesn't need large lorries, and the sites identified for new planting are close to the public road. A final point, the applicant suggests that the new track will improve access for the public, but this type of intrusive development, which would leave a large scar across the landscape, is not supported by North East Trust members for access to wider areas. To summarize,
sorry, I'm going to have to just ask you to wind up, please, and then we'll pass on.
The application is not commensurate with the local development plan, and we fully support the report's recommendations to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Tessa, are you ready to start? You have 3 minutes, thank you.
Thank you very much. The National Park Authority has introduced an important presumption against new hill tracks in open moorland. This photo is a general view over the proposal area, showing the wide open nature of this moorland landscape. Your landscape officer identifies here that the development would have adverse landscape impacts, with the track imposing a prominent linear feature. The popular... Sorry, it's not really wrong. The popular well-used car park is at the top of the photo, and the new road and new bridge would be on the right of the existing road and bridge. Here, the landscape officer identifies even greater impacts with significant adverse landscape and visual effects. This This view and the next show the very high quality landscape and exceptionally attractive setting of the bridge, looking upstream and downstream to the native birch woods of Craigdhu. The new road and bridge will be on the extreme right of this photo. The very special setting beyond the bridge, looking up the glen, showing the exceptional landscape and wildness qualities. There are also two natural heritage impacts I'd like to draw your attention to. The first is the permanent loss of heathland habitats, as referred to by Gavin. These habitats are on the Scottish Biodiversity List, and this is the list of habitats identified by Scottish ministers as of principal importance. There is no compensation for this, and therefore this is a permanent habitat loss. Second is impacts on breeding black grouse. Black grouse are on the red list, are in serious long-term decline. Numbers are dropping and their distribution is contracting, both of which are classic signs of a population in real trouble. There's lek sites where males display and females come crucially to mate within 500 metres of the new track. Nature Scot identifies specifically for breeding black grouse a disturbance buffer zone of from 500 to 750 metres, meaning that the lek sites at under 500 metres distance here are well within the disturbance zone. Therefore, the track, once in use with estate activities, mountain bikers, dog walkers, etc., would introduce permanent disturbance to leks and potentially lead to their failure, resulting in reduced breeding success. Thank you.
Thank you, Tessa. And we'll now move quickly on to Dave Morris. Are you ready to go, Dave?
Yes, convener, thank you. This planning application for the construction of a new private road in the Cairngorms is a serious test of the planning process in the national park. If the committee were to approve this application, it would push the gate wide open for other landowners to come forward with private road proposals of dubious merit. It needs to be emphasised that one of the key reasons for establishing the Cairngorms National Park in 2003 was to protect its natural beauty. That protection should include the rigorous control of private road development. I have known the area that is subject to this planning applications since the 1970s when I came to live in Newton Moor. In my view, there is no other settlement in the national park which is so fortunate to have an area of undulating moorland, rich in wildlife and relatively little modified by artificial structures, which is so close to the settlement and the public road network. Its enjoyment for walking, skiing, cycling, or simply observing nature and the landscape at its best is of huge value. The planning application before you today is remarkable in that the landowners, the Jaffrey family, say that they want to construct this road for the extraction of forest trees, despite the fact that they also accept that the value of those trees in the marketplace will not cover the cost of road construction. This implies that there are other reasons for wanting this road, such as the transportation of shooting clients or guests who are unwilling to use existing private and public road network. The recent suggestion from the Jaffrey family that they want the new road for conservation purposes is bizarre. All conservation initiatives carried out on their land up until now have not needed such a road. Furthermore, increasing woodland cover in the future by natural regeneration or planting will produce woodland quite different in character to the 1970s plantations. They will not require large lorries for extraction purposes. Decades of windblown have left a mere 21 hectares of undamaged timber out of a total of 67 acres of existing plantation forest. If conservation is a priority, then that would be best achieved by managing the existing woodland in ways which improve its value as winter shelter for red deer, by increasing the quantity of deadwood habitat, and by supporting local demand for winter fuel. The committee report describes how the wild landscape would be irreparably damaged by the...
Dave, you can just get you to finish up with your final sentence. Thank you.
And my house is very close to the road in Glen Road, and I can assure the committee that large vehicles travel regularly along its length, and I can see no difficulty in appropriately sized timber lorries using it, if indeed timber extraction is required. I urge the committee to support the Park Officer's recommendation to reject this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you to George, Dave and Tessa. Committee members, do you have any questions for either of our members of the public that have spoken today? No, I see no hands up. Thank you. If I can just make sure that everyone's muted on screen, that would be great. Thank you. Gavin, is there anything that you'd like to pick up on about anything that's been said so far?
Yeah, I just want to pick up that point about alternatives, because neither we nor Highland Council, I've just double checked, have anything that shows multiple other alternative routes. We do have on the plans sometimes the previous line track that was previously applied for and then withdrawn, so that's there as a comparison on some plans. And yes, the landscape impacts of that track would be worse than the landscape impacts of this track. But that's not to say that the landscape impacts of this track are not significant and they are not mitigated in the application. And that's the real point there. And so I can't comment, and I don't think the committee can comment on any other alternatives. Speculation, there might be other routes that could have been better, but they're not here in front of us and we don't know what they are, and they weren't applied for, so it doesn't matter. I think that's the key point. And I think, I suppose, from our point of view as planners, we're not making any comment on the potential uses of this track. Timber extraction can be one of them. There could be multiple other estate uses. They're all legitimate uses. So we're talking about this development as a planning application for the track.
Thank you, Gavin. So looking at the planning application as a track and what we have before us today, committee members, we're going to move into discussion. Are there any comments or points that committee members want to put forward in relation to this application? Fiona.
I'd just like to make an observation. It was to do with comments made by one of the applicants on the truthfulness of our officers. I am concerned at the approach that was taken, which is calling into question the integrity of our officers. And I believe that language is important, that I'm perfectly happy with comments being made on perceived accuracy, but I am not happy about comments being made on the truthfulness of our officers. And I'd want to note my disquiet at such comments being made.
Thank you, Fiona. That's it. Any other questions or comments on the planning application? Eleanor.
Yeah, I think for me, we went through a lot of discussion and a lot of painful discussion when we came up with the policy on hill tracks. And I think we arrived at a good compromise position. And for me, there's a lot of point in having policies in place if we're immediately then going to go against them for no good reason, and I can't find a good reason in this application, so therefore I am happy with the evidence that the planning officers have presented to us that this application does not meet our policies, and therefore I support the planner's recommendation.
Thank you, Eleanor. Derek and then Doug.
I would just like to second Eleanor on that.
Thank you, Derek. Doug.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm in Eleanor's camp as well, and I think what I would like to say is I'm glad that the principle was accepted, and Gavin, you said so, that the principle's there. And I think the comments about sporting estates and the contributions they can make to biodiversity, I fully support that. But on the basis of the evidence of the application that we've seen, I would agree with Eleanor. I don't think it's enough.
So I'm seeing lots of nodding around the room, and personally I think the impact on the visual landscape, the size of this track, the length of this track, in terms of how that outweighs what we're hearing today about what it's going to be used for, is not one that I think acceptable. So I too am happy to go with the officer's recommendation. And so to pick up on Fiona's point, I must state that our officers work within the planning system and the planning rules, and I believe that our officers work with full integrity and openness with their clients, and they're able to show that when they come and speak to committee, and try to keep committee as informed as possible and put the facts before us so that we are able to make a good planning decision. So thank you. So therefore, I think committee members, I think we are happy then to support the officer's recommendation and to refuse planning permission for this application. Thank you. Okay, committee members, can we get Russell back in the room, please? Thank you. Committee members, committee members, I'll move on quickly. On to item 7. So this application relates to detailed planning application for the erection of 3 flats and the emission of 3 houses, as well as the relocation of footpath and associated works at the Horsefield site in Avonmore. And Stephanie is going to take us through this application. Thank you. So over to you, Stephanie.
So the application site is known as the Horsefield, is located on land to the north of Aviemore Highland Resort, with the A9 to the west and the retail park to the east there. The site forms part of a wider housing development, which is currently under construction. So here we have the proposed site plan, and this application seeks to make amendments to phase 3 of the development, which I shall now outline. And just if I can get the cursor working here, so it's for interest, this part here and this section up here are the 2 bits that I'll be talking about. So the proposal looks to remove 3 detached dwellings located to the west of the site and reconfigure the approved pathway to avoid the tree roots and provide a more gradual incline. And it also looks to replace the 3 units lost. The applicant will amend the northerly block of flats, known as block 4, to include an additional storey to accommodate 3 2-bedroomed flats. And here we have the amended cycle and bin storage for the flats to accommodate the additional bins and bikes required for the 3 flats. So due to the flats obviously being changed as well, additional car parking was required, which is just shown on this part down here. And we go to the considerations now. So the change from 4-bedroomed detached units to 2-bedroomed flats, providing smaller units of accommodation, is welcomed, as the National Park has a disproportionately high level of larger and detached dwellings, which has resulted in a housing stock that is poorly equipped to meet arising housing needs. So the omission of the 3 western units also provides biodiversity gains by allowing the footpath to avoid the trees and retain more open space. The proposed change of the flatted blocks from 2-storey to 3-storey is in keeping with the established design, scale and massing of other plots within the housing development. So this flatted block design and scale is already permitted on site within the housing development, and although the increase in height would make the building slightly more prominent, it would be seen in the context of the other new builds on the area. So the nearest residential property is approximately 40 metres from that building, and at this distance the higher building will be more visible, but it's not likely to make a significant change to the landscape character or the visual amenity beyond that currently approved with the application. In terms of residential amenity, a couple of letters of concern have been received regarding the impacts on the neighbouring community, but it is judged that due to the existing natural screening from the tree cover and vegetation, together with the distance between Block 4 and the properties, it is not considered to give rise to any adverse impacts on overlooking or loss of privacy. Concern has also been raised regarding noise impacts from vehicles parking. Now, the new parking spaces do not extend beyond the build line of the eastern side of Block 4 and would not introduce any vehicles any closer to the neighbouring properties than that already approved. In terms of servicing and access, the additional flatted units do not introduce any change to the approved access or drainage arrangements. Now, the Highland Council Flood Risk Management Officer has no objections, noting that the proposed changes will not have any impact on flood risk or drainage matters. Adequate vehicle parking, waste and bicycle storage have been provided to serve the additional flats. Now, the roads team have actually recommended an additional condition to agree the bike store security arrangements. Now, members are therefore requested to agree to the addition of this condition on any subsequent decision due to the fact that the bin store and the cycle store is all encompassed and not segregated. So I would recommend that that condition is added to any subsequent decision that you guys take. And in terms of ecological interests, the alterations do not change that. That's already been dealt with under the previous applications, and planning permission is therefore recommended to be approved subject to those planning conditions outlined on page 12 of the report and subject to the inclusion of the additional planning condition prior agreement of the bike store security arrangements.
Thank you, Stephanie. Gavin, would you like to comment?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to reinforce the point because a number of the objectors here are people who are very concerned about flood risk from adjacent the neighbouring sites, and part of the things that they've been raising are their concern about that. The reason that we're taking this to you today with the recommendation of approval is it doesn't change anything in relation to that drainage. So. And we are looking and making sure that the developer addresses that problem, so that all the problems that are associated with wider development will be addressed. So this application doesn't change any of that.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Stephanie. Sorry, you mentioned an additional planning condition.
I did.
So can you just tell me the wording?
It's for the. My wording again. The prior agreement with Cairngorms National Park Authority and the Transport Planning Team on the bike store security arrangements and the implementation of those.
Members, any questions for Stephanie? Bill.
Stephanie, do we have any visualisations of the where this new build will sit in the landscape?
No.
Then I would suggest that we should actually go and look at it rather than just seeing it as a diagram of set of houses.
Is there a request to make a site visit?
Yes.
Derek?
I'd have to concur with Bill in that. That was what I was going to suggest. I would quite like to see this and see the effect it has on the topography of the area.
Okay, so just to remind members, if we make a site visit, we'd have to defer decision today and put that to a vote. Yeah, that could go to.
Yes, but I think in practical terms, the thing that I'm thinking about is that might be a complicated site visit because this is a construction site that's in full flow, and we're talking about a lot of members going onto a site and all the PPE required and things like that. But there are other ways of seeing it from the edges which we could also look at.
I would be happy to be guided by you as to the best way of seeing it in situ, but as of just seeing it as a 3-storey block of flats doesn't give me the impression of actually what it looks like in situ. So if you could provide some alternative to a site visit, then I would be happy to propose that, if I can get a second.
Whether there were no visuals.
No, I'm quite sure the applicant could provide us with visualisations. So if you were happy with that, then
Xander?
Right. During COVID, we talked about having drone footage or this sort of thing to aid in completing site visits. I'm just wondering that might be an appropriate alternative here as well. They could be asked to provide either drone footage or visualisations or both.
Well, I think that probably one or the other makes sense in this case.
Yeah, so this will give them an option to pick whichever is faster and practice as well.
Thank you. Any other questions, Lauren?
Yeah, I've just got a clarification. How is the impact on privacy assessed? So saying that there's going to be 3 tower block of 3 flats, and I'm just looking at the sort of notes that have been sort of submitted by neighbours. How is that actually assessed? Could somebody sort of clarify that for me?
So there are some standards around proximity distance and angles into main rooms and things like that. So at this distance, that already moves past that kind of privacy issue. There are also trees in the way that obscure part of that as well. So where these have become easier, I suppose, to address are where you've got buildings right next to each other, and you might have a building that then has windows overlooking somebody's. Clearly, in every new development, there are opportunities for people to see other people's properties from developments, and that doesn't affect their privacy. It's about impacts which are very close. It's not to say that people won't like the fact that there's development next door, and that happens very often. But it's really about the proximity and the degree of view into the bits of their house that they use most often.
Thank you. Any other points of clarity for Gavin at this stage? So Bill and Derek, I'll ask you to hold on to your thought there. The agent has requested to address the committee as well. So if we let the agent speak, and then we'll move into our discussion.
Just let you know, the agent isn't actually currently online, and we've had no communication from them this morning to send any apologies.
I'll bring in Bill and Derek. So Bill, your suggestion was a different visualisation or potentially a site visit. The agent isn't with us. Members, I'm looking for indications from them as to whether members, the majority of members, wish to see this in a different So either a different visualisation or a visit to the site, something around that, whatever's practical that the planning team can come up with us.
Yeah. And I think it's unfortunate that there's not a visualisation, can't even say the word, because we like to try and pick out things that should be a site visit in advance. And I think there's a miss here that there hasn't been some sort of submission.
Yeah, I mean, we've probably missed that. I mean, as officers, we're talking about a building in the same place as a building. It has another story on it, so it makes it 3 stories instead of 2 stories. So to our mind, we didn't see that as something that was difficult for us to appreciate, but
So if the majority of members wish to go down that route, then we'll stop discussions now, defer that and bring it back when we have the information it should be for the next planning committee. Are members happy with that?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So we'll defer decision until our next planning committee. So I will move now on to item 8. The application has been withdrawn by the applicant. So we're moving on to item 10. So Derek will see you.
So long, farewell.
Adieu.
So item 9 is an item for decision and relates to Cairngorms wind farm extension. And I'm going to hand over to Emma to take us through the paper.
Thank you. Yes, the application is for a proposed wind farm of 22 turbines, 13 of which will have a maximum tip height of 200 metres and 9 with a 180 metre tip height. The application also includes proposals for associated infrastructure, including tracks, a construction compound, a substation and battery storage compound and borrow pits. This application is being determined by the Scottish Government as a Section 36 application, and therefore the Park Authority are responding as a consultee. This slide gives an indication of the proposed layout and where the various elements will be located. The proposed wind farm would be located within the Cairngorms estate, approximately 11 kilometres south of Duffton, 13 kilometres south west of Huntly, and will be approximately 7 kilometres from the park boundary at its closest point. It would be immediately adjacent to the existing Cairngorms wind farm, which consists of 18 turbines with a tip height of 110 metres. This slide shows the proposed wind farm in the centre of the map with turbine locations marked by the black dots and within the development site boundary, which is marked in red. That's it here. The existing Cairngorms wind farm is shown by the green dots here, lying to the east of the application site, and the park boundary is indicated by the yellow line at the bottom of the screen there. So the blue areas on, I beg your pardon. Sorry about that. The blue areas on this map show where there is a theoretical visibility of existing and consented wind farms, with the green areas indicating where the proposed Cairngorms wind farm would be seen. The proposed 22 turbine wind farm would also introduce theoretical visibility of wind farm into the areas shown yellow on the map. The red cross, I'll just show you it here, indicates the location of a viewpoint, viewpoint 14, which is the only viewpoint that's been taken within the park boundary. This slide shows this viewpoint, and this has been taken from the applicant's environmental report, which is referred to in your papers. The proposed wind farm would only have a moderate effect on the one special landscape quality of the park, with the introduction of aviation lighting and the impact on the dark skies. The site is, however, located where there is a considerable amount of cloud cover for a significant period of time. The lights will only operate at 10% luminosity 94% of the time, and coupled with the proposed mitigation measures, it's considered that the effects will be limited in both nature and significance. The addition of the wind farm is not considered to be significant when compared against the baseline of the existing level of effects from existing and consented wind farms. So to conclude, It's considered that this proposed extension to the Clashindarroch Wind Farm complies with policies as contained within the National Park Partnership Plan and the National Planning Framework 4. It's therefore recommended that committee doesn't object to the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. So committee members, and we can move on to questions and discussion at the same time. Do we have any questions for Emma or any points of view that committee members want to put forward in terms of what Emma's outlined to you? See no hands? So committee members, we've been asked to confirm that the CMPA does not object to the application for the proposed Clashindarroch Wind Farm extension. Thank you. I'll move now on to, can we bring Derek in, please? Sorry. Okay, committee members, I'll just move quickly on to any other business in terms of this public session, and then I'll ask to move into a confidential session. So any other items of business? Nothing has been raised with me, but is there anything anyone wants to raise in the room? No, thank you. So all that's left for me to say in the public meeting is that the date of the next meeting will be in 6 weeks' time, on Friday the 9th of June. Thank you. Members, I'll now move a motion to move into a confidential session. Are members happy to do so? Thank you. I'll just wait until we've turned off the recording.